Hi. I was wondering, just an opinion, what do you think will happen in July and after July with the release of Mr. Kent Hovind?
I didn't hear that.
I can't hear the question, forgive me.
So what do you think is going to happen after July with Mr. Kent Hovind?
What's going to happen with Mr. Kent Hovind?
Correct, yes.
He's released in July.
Is he going to be released in July? Because I heard that he just got another conviction. No, I'm not
Is your
kidding.
mic on? Is your mic on?
I thought it was. Yeah, but I had just read that Kent Hovind had another conviction. Okay.
Do I think that it'll have any real impact? No. In fact, even in mainstream Christian circles, I didn't know of him at the time. Dr. Dino and whatnot. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't have an impact, but he'll probably come out swinging. But I don't think he's going to. I don't think he's going to have any real impact any more than his son is having right now.
Yeah, I'm happy to see
what I miss?
The question was when Kent Hovind's released, apparently, according to our questioner, in a few months from the Pokey, will he have any real impact out there?
Actually, there's an additional indictment against him, and he's probably going to stay in jail for a lot longer.
All right, first off, thanks for coming. It's great to have you here. So up in Queensland, there's a rehab program for teens, and I recently attended my sister's graduation from said program, and the leader of the program said that the edge that they have is they have God. It's a Baptist community, Baptist-led rehab program, and she said that the edge that they have over other rehab programs is that they have religion. And I just wanted to know what your reaction was to that.
At first, I thought you were telling me about a rehab program to get people away from religion. I seriously thought that. And of course, they don't have God. And they don't have God. What, is this not working?
No, it's working. You're
Is
just not speaking.
there a way to increase the volume up in the booth? Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's better.
Okay. Go ahead.
So the quick answer is prove it. So one of the problems is that there's programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, which has been declared by courts on occasion to actually be religious. This idea that you must appeal to a higher power. I pretty much despise Alcoholics Anonymous, but I will say, for the people who are convinced that it worked for them, I'm happy that they're sober no matter where they point their gratitude. The problem is that there aren't good studies on recidivism rates from any group, whether they have God or the Bible or not. What we really need to be doing is spending more time learning about who we are, learning about the brain, figuring out what makes people more prone to addiction, how better to treat it, so that we're actually helping people in a science-based way. And if it were to turn out that prayer, even to a fictional God, was some sort of wonder cure for substance abuse, well, I might actually side with prayer because now we've got scientific proof, hey, this works. Until then, they don't get to claim an edge that they can't demonstrate. Well, they can claim it, but we get to say, no, prove it.
Cool,
Thank you.
I'm frustrated by the number of people who find their way free. Oh, my life was terrible, and I was drunk, and I beat my wife, and I was on drugs, and Jesus fixed it all. Maybe so. The gentleman I spoke to today out on the street said that he became a Christian and Jesus completely transformed his life. And I said, I believe that when you became a Christian, your life changed. I don't believe that it's because of Jesus. What's your justification for saying that Jesus changed it instead of you changed it and you're giving credit? And he goes, oh, well, that's fair.
G'day, thanks again for coming out. Hopefully there won't be too many of them, but I would like to ask a question in relation to a lecture Matt gave. In 2012, he gave a lecture to Secular Student Alliance about unsafe assumptions. And I was wondering how you three deal with unsafe assumptions in your online and real-life activities.
This is not quite as bad as asking about episode 431. But without knowing the specifics of what I said, I don't know that I can actually comment on that.
Can you ask that? Can you summarize it quickly?
I think it was about asking the right questions.
Generally, yes. You just start off with an anecdote about generally the emails you get and how they all sound the same except they're different comments, and it's just all the little assumptions we make in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, for me, the key is to be aware of it, to be aware that nobody's cornered the market on reason. None of us are perfect thinkers. None of us are likely to ever be. But recognizing that that's the case and trying to do a better job, realizing that everybody can be fooled. As somebody who's been doing magic for 40 years, I can fool all of you, guaranteed. And the second you say you can't be fooled, you already have been. But being aware of that is how you get better at not being fooled in things that matter.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, the three of you. This is quite a sort of starstruck moment for me, so I'll try not to stutter too much. Just wanted to know what various ways you think that Australia either can or maybe even is sort of advancing secularism at a governmental or just societal level that you don't think you could get away with in America because of the already high religious rates, even though you have separation of church and state?
Well, the advantage that Australia has is kind of like the advantage that sober children have when they see their drunken parents. You have America to look at.
I'm of the mindset that we don't start at the top, and I may be well wrong, and my brothers on stage here may disagree, but I don't think you start with, we must elect a more reasonable candidate. I think you have to begin to see change at the lower levels, at our social circles, when we begin championing reason ourselves and our families and friends and neighborhoods and communities and whatnot, so that their constituency becomes something they will then represent as more rational politicians. Now, as I understand it, you guys are struggling because there's a large secular sort of a percentage, but there's a lot of apathy. People don't worry about it. They're busy living their lives. Would you say that's accurate and a frustration for you? So, I mean, maybe the answer is, instead of being apatheists, we try to educate people about why the whole misconception of coexisting is damaging, right? I mentioned in Brisbane that bumper sticker that says coexist. I hate that sticker. Because it only works if everybody decides they're going to sort of have a personal belief and coexist. Is fundamental religion coexisting? No, they're doing a great commission. They're going after our youngest and most vulnerable. Is Islam? Are they coexisting? Hell no. I think we have to educate people as to the damage being done and why we have to hold up a hand of protest and fight against damaging and bad ideas. And maybe that's an answer. I don't know. I can't speak to your culture perhaps as well as you can.
And because I've never given a short answer, and there's three of us, I'm going to combine theirs into something that's a bit of a cautionary tale. In the 19th century in the United States, there was Colonel Ingersoll, the great agnostic, who had debates with ministers in the newspapers, was famous, spoke at the Republican National Convention. The secularists and the elite thinkers in the United States we've got this religion thing completely sorted, let the peons keep the religion, and it became taboo to even discuss it. And then what happened? In the 1950s, you had the McCarthy-era reaction to godless communism. And this is in a country that has, ostensibly, separation of church and state. What we find is that there's somebody constantly trying to break down that protection, and if you're not vigilant, you will find that you wake up in a country that's very different from the one you thought you had. And in a country where you don't have that express protection of separation of church and state, I think while things may be going generally well, you need to be extra vigilant and perhaps be working together to try to change it so that that right, that fundamental human right, that you don't get to dictate what I believe and people don't get preferential treatment based on what they believe, becomes enshrined in the law so that perhaps you don't have to be as vigilant.
Yeah. Step forward.
Hi, I'm super sweaty. So I know, Matt, you normally say that belief is like it has a binary nature. You either accept a claim. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you either accept the claim or you don't. I don't know if you guys believe the same thing.
So
but,
I'm reluctant to say binary. Okay. I believe that for each individual proposition, you either accept it or you don't.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that once you're on the accepting side or don't accept side, that there aren't various degrees. The levels to which you are convinced or not convinced can change.
Okay. So do you guys think that it's useful to talk about the strength or the confidence level of a belief when talking to believers? Like,
In certain instances, there might be some truth to that. Like when we talk about the global flood. I express to believers that we know for certain there was no global flood. It's not like there was a chance of it. When they want to argue the existence of God, for example, okay, well, we can talk about a higher power. If you can convince me of that, maybe you can convince me that there's a God, and maybe you can convince me that there's a Christian God. But you know what you'll never get to? Never ever will you show me that the Bible is true, because the Bible's already been proven false. And so regardless whether there's a God or not, if God shows up tomorrow, he can't save the Bible. It's already wrong.
Well, you're just angry. That's not my God.
So one aspect of that is, yes, sometimes the degree of certainty or their confidence level matters because it's going to impact the actions they take on behalf of it. I don't care if they call it knowledge. I don't care if they say, I know that I know that I know that I know, you know.
That's the one bothers me.
Yeah, it's annoying. But we act in accordance with what we believe, even if we're not sure what we believe. And even if there's a belief that you have that doesn't impact other beliefs, that's somehow isolated, there's still some thought process that you went through that led you to that belief. Something else in your brain convinced you that this thing which is false is true. And even if that specific discrete belief doesn't affect anything, this process will. It will encourage you to believe other false things. And there's a t-shirt that is popular that says, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And I think that's brilliant.
Hey, do you guys get weird about the word belief when you're speaking? I mean, a lot of people take me to task if I say, well, you know, I believe this, or I believe that evolution is supported by the evidence. If you use the word believe in any context, do they come after you?
They use a different context than we do. For me, belief is a condition of my understanding of the facts, and my belief will change obligately according to my knowledge of the information. With many believers, I've heard belief expressed as an act of will, of mind over matter, that you can change reality if you can believe hard enough.
So belief based on the evidence as opposed to belief because I have faith.
Yeah, you either base your beliefs on evidence or you base your belief on faith. And belief is simply something you believe to be or perceive to be true but don't yet know.
But the word doesn't give you pause at all?
Nope. Well, the problem is that they're not using belief in the appropriate context, because belief is something that you don't know. You believe it, you don't know it. And so what they do is claim knowledge that you don't really have.
But you can believe and know, because knowledge is a subset of belief.
But how do you know you're not brain and vat?
Okay, so there are people with questions other than us.
Get a whole nother show going on here.
Hello, and thank you for coming to Australia. I'm unfortunately going to touch on something that was asked by one of the other questioners, which is that Australians are much more actively secular. So we don't vote based on faith, we don't create public policy based on faith. So my question is a fairly nuanced one to the Australian situation, so I'll try and make this as concise as I can, which is that in Australia we have a Judeo-Christian background that has permeated both our culture and our language. And so people hold assumptions, base assumptions, that then affect their opinions on everything from animal rights to sex and gender to multiculturalism, but don't necessarily recognise that the premise that they're starting from is based on a Judeo-Christian belief system, not facts, belief system, which makes it much more harder to tackle. So in the case of animal rights, whilst we can engage on that topic on a number of different fronts, normally people engage in it from the perspective of, well, God gave man domain over animals. And people don't necessarily realise, and I'd actually include people in the secular community and the atheist community, that that's necessarily where the initial assumptions are coming from. And that has huge policy implications in Australia. So from the perspective of atheist communicators, and I realise that you come from a country that is, to say this with love, less mature than Australia. You're dealing with issues that are much clearer, much easier to attack because they're much bigger. Whereas in Australia we deal with much more diffuse issues. How do you approach a conversation about that Again, from the perspective of being atheist communicators, so having those conversations and challenging those base assumptions that don't necessarily get recognised as faith-based, even by secular and atheists.
So if they're not being recognized as being rooted in a faith, I don't know that it's necessarily a good idea to immediately point that out. It might be better to just address the issue. I find when I'm talking about matters of faith with people, matters of religious conviction, that if I'm not making progress because their religion has put up roadblocks, barriers, like the na-na-na-na-na guy, that it's better to talk about something else that uses a similar type of reasoning, to apply the Socratic method, get them, ask them questions, and get them to realize that I'm using reason for all of this and all of this and all of this, and wow, why don't I use it here? So you have to kind of build up a pool of sound epistemology, of sound reasoning skills, and then show them the value of it, and then say, oh yes, it applies to this, which, by the way, the reason you believe this is actually because of this faith-based position and not because of the reasoning you thought.
I don't have that much fortune. I get things that are thrown at me that have no basis in reality, and they're therefore based on faith, like the objections to marriage equality, for example. No justification behind that whatsoever. I know people who say that their rights as Christians are being oppressed because other people are living freely.
But you can use the same tactic there. Yeah. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Seth, anything to add?
Honestly, these guys will cover it thoroughly, and I'm like, with somebody in the queue, I'd ask and answer, and I'm enjoying the answers as much as you guys are. So
I want to. So this is technically like the last Unholy Trinity event, at least in Australia. We're kind of getting together in Vancouver, but that's kind of the end. I really want to show up in Vancouver, and during the Q&A, let's just stay quiet, the two of us.
I mean, I talk for a living, man. I can sound off if you'd like, but I just feel like these guys are so good at what they do.
Hello. I've written down my question beforehand
Nice and loud,
because
please.
I knew I'd get tongue-tied standing in front of three people I admire and respect so much. So
Thank you.
most of your work online has been about dealing with the less rational members of religion, the science deniers, the dinosaur deniers, the young earth creationists. But how do you or how would you discuss religion with a more progressive religious person who embraces modern biological and cosmological science, who acknowledges the fact that the Bible is based on myths and legends and not facts, but still believes that Jesus is Lord and his return is imminent? How do you approach that?
I will start on that one, if I may. Well, I'm amazed at how people walk away from religious belief, right? Many of us started as fundamentalists. The Bible's absolutely true, word for word. It's inerrant, and all of a sudden becomes inconvenient, and we step away and say, well, some of it was for yesterday and some of it's for today. And then we walk away and say, well, a lot of it are just stories. There's morality tales. And then, you know what? I don't believe in the Bible, but I am a Christian. And I don't know that I hold just to Jesus, but all gods. And you continue to sort of take these retreat positions. And you end up in kind of that, I don't know if you call it moderate or just apathetic, or this nebulous area where you're not a fundamentalist. I do a lot of my work against the fundamentalists because they are the ones who are doing the most damage. Look, the person who mentions Jesus when they find their car keys, right, and that's about it, I ain't worried about them. They're not the ones who are trying to change the laws, who are trying to jam prayer down children's throats, who are teaching pseudoscience, who are out there making a buck on a mountain of lies and doing it in the name of God. The people who are kind of the apathy types aren't my main concern because they're not the ones on the front line doing the most damage. And so it happens to be usually those. It's like that guy in New York, that pastor who posted the 10 guidelines for choosing a good Christian wife. You see that list? Right? Make sure she's subservient. Make sure she doesn't like to travel too much because then she's a wayward woman. Make sure she's not a feminist. Make sure she's not this. Make sure she doesn't do that. Essentially, he could have whittled the list down to 2 points: barefoot, pregnant. Right? That's it. Those guys are the ones who are out there swinging for the fences, and that's why they are often my target.
So I'm doing a Patreon project where I'm basically, that's how I make my living. I produce videos teaching people how to have the conversation, and it applies to both having conversation with your family members or whoever you happen to run into, but also formal debates. I'll tell you the big secrets. Ray Comfort. Everybody know who that is? William Lane Craig. Everybody know who that is? Yep. Identical. The difference is that Craig is a good orator, he is a good debater, and he is good at taking an argument that is fallacious and finding a way to hide that. That's the difference between the two of them. The other difference is that Craig's willing to debate, he just won't debate me, and Ray Comfort agrees to debate me and then shows up and doesn't and says he doesn't care to prove anything. There are no new arguments. The higher theologians, the lofty, oh yes, we've studied St. Anselm's ontological argument and we've determined that God must exist because a perfect being could not be perfect if it didn't exist.
Well, that's pretty damn good.
Wrong country, and they caught it. But actually, right country for the argument. But anyway, that's the key. And recognizing that when you're having the conversation, that you're probably not going to meet anything new, but pay attention anyway. Don't just wait for your turn to talk, and don't think that because they just said something about the beginning of the universe that you start preparing your response to the cosmological argument or the Kalam cosmological argument, because they might not know what the hell that is, and they might have mentioned universe in some other context, and then you find you're talking about two different things, and nobody's going to get anywhere. So listen, and actually, give a shit. How do you maintain patience on the show? Oh my gosh, you should hang up on everybody. Why do you do that? It's a waste of time. No, it's not. How many people in here used to be religious? You weren't a waste of time. It wasn't a waste of time to talk to them. And no matter how bad their arguments were or how little they understood, the fact that somebody cared enough to talk about these topics and share with them is enough. The most important thing we can do to change the world is to be out. And the second most important thing we can do to change the world is be outspoken.
What do you think about the late Christopher Hitchens' view that religion poisons everything, and why?
Could you say that question again?
What do we think about Christopher Hitchens and the idea that religion poisons everything?
I have to agree. I did a presentation in Imagine No Religion conference where my presentation was that religion reverses everything. I was told as a child that all the devil worshippers and everything, that they try to turn everything upside down or invert everything of the way that God wants it to be. But that's what I see religion doing. Like what we mentioned about, or what he mentioned about the good old days, that was what my presentation was about. The good old days when only white, heterosexual Protestant men had rights. The way that everything is colorized, the way everything's getting worse and worse all the time, when statistically, no, it's actually getting better. Religion has a tendency to reverse everything, and it just has a tendency to destroy family relationships, right? It is by design, because you read Matthew 10, Jesus lays out the foundation where he says that, if you don't hate your brother, you can't be my disciple. You have to you have to love me more than your wife, more than your children, and you have to forsake all of them for me.
I think I'd take it back a step and say that irrationality poisons everything. That's the foundation of religious thought, so far as I can tell. Mistakes in thinking. Some of them intentionally, some of them self-deception, some of them just mistakes.
There's something that we don't often talk about, we don't like to talk about, and that is that there are many kind, compassionate, charitable, loving, helpful people in the church. Precious people in the church who desperately want to do good things and make the world better. And it's easy for us to sound superior and talk about them like they're all crazy and they're all this and they're all deceived and they're all this. And I agree with Matt, I do see many of them as victims. I mean, I was one person who, I had this sort of smug superiority about having the answer, the truth. And I didn't know anything about the world. I didn't know how much I didn't know. I was kind of a victim. But, I was a good person, and I wanted to make the world better. And, there are a lot of churches out there who, under the guise of religion, they feed hungry mouths, and they build shelters for those who have nothing, and they give medicine and whatnot. The challenge I have, and I think where I might line up with Hitchens, is that these are all the efforts of human hands. God didn't reach down and save the 14,000 people who will starve to death today human beings, even under the guise of missions work, were the ones who loaded up the planes and cargo dropped and built the shelters and gave them clean water and mended the sick and helped them get an education to break the cycle of poverty. So people are screaming, God, 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 God all the time. I'm glad that there are compassionate people out there, but I feel like we cheat these charitable actions and the actions of goodness when we give credit to this invisible other who does none of the work. I'm not saying we did it for the credit, but I'm saying it's a distraction. If we see real solutions in the real world, we can be more effective at providing those solutions. So, I mean, I don't know if I'd use the word poison. I do think that it's unnecessary, but I also want to remind everybody that we should always be self-aware enough and aware enough of the situation to try to see the religious in three dimensions. Many of them, a great many of them, really, really good people. And that's the truth.
Well, thanks, guys, for being down here and for your fantastic work. My question is, to be as effective as possible at changing minds or planting seeds of doubt, in your experience, what pillar of a person's religious belief system is worth attacking first when time or opportunity is scarce?
Oh, God.
So if it's... Oh, sorry, was there a second?
Is there one particular strategy that you find most effective?
So for me, if I'm dealing with somebody who's a Christian who points to the Bible, I always go to slavery. It's the most intuitively obvious thing. We all recognize it. We may not know why, which prompts another discussion about why we know that slavery is a bad thing. I don't know why it never occurred to people to ask the people who were enslaved. They could have told us a long time before. But the Bible is very, very, very clear about who you can enslave, how much to pay for them, how you can beat them, who you can't beat, who you have to let go. And the gentleman I talked to today, I asked him right off the bat. I went down this, hey, is slavery wrong? Yeah. Is the Bible good? Yeah. Is the Bible from God? Yeah. How come God sanctioned slavery? And he went, the Bible doesn't say that. Yeah, Exodus 21, verses 21 and 22, if you want to start there, we can move on. So we scrambled around until we found a Bible. He was shocked that this was in the Bible. If men struggle and, when you can beat your slave as long as they don't die within a day or two.
My favourite go-to is ethnic genocide.
What's that?
My favourite go-to is ethnic genocide.
Yeah, and even...
I didn't hear.
Death and genocide.
Oh.
Who was it that was it Bill Craig who was talking about how these people deserved it? So that's the apologetic when you bring up the death and genocide of let's kill the Amalekites and blah 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 and everybody else, and they deserved it. They were evil people who were opposed to God.
You can do all sorts of atrocities in the name of purification, right?
They seem to forget about the babies.
Now we have a cue. If you would, sir. What happens often is people will begin to speak from the audience. I want to make sure we do justice to those who are in line. Do you lean to the Socratic method? Do you go with the Bogosian thing where you ask questions?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, what I also do is I will provide information that corrects things. Like if you're just standing there spouting untruths. No, that's not the way it is. He was like, oh, I get my information from creation.com. Well, maybe you should get it from science.com. Oh, but those guys at creation.com, they have PhDs. Okay, does that mean they're right? Oh, but no, there's a lot of them. Okay, well, the scientists with PhDs are about, if they're the width of my finger, who accept creationism. If we were to draw a line, continue out of the scientists with PhDs who think this is crap, it probably goes over to the other side of the street, maybe further. Now, that's a fallacious appeal to popularity. No, I'm not saying they are right because there are more of them. I'm saying among the experts, there's an overwhelming consensus that the best explanation for diversity of life is the theory of evolution by natural selection. Well, they're being excluded. No, they're welcome to submit peer-reviewed papers to demonstrate the truth of what they're saying, and they have not done it. The wedge document, the strategy document for the intelligent design community in the United States had two prongs: undermine evolution and produce positive arguments for our position. They've never even attempted the second one, and all they've done is kind of whine about the first one.
I always tell them that Deepak Chopra has a PhD.
Yeah.
Shuts them right up. Shuts them right up.
Okay, thank you.
Which stands for piled high and deep.
Yeah, I'd also like to mention when you brought up about the Bible and you was shocked to see it in there, and I mentioned this to somebody earlier today. It's surprising to me how fast the argument goes from the Bible, that's not what the Bible says, to that's not what the Bible means.
How are you guys? My name is Omar Flores. I excuse my language. I'm from the south border, Latin American. Probably identify myself here as the only fundamental Christian present. I came because of an invitation of my friend. I just want to say to you and to everyone that we Christians have committed a lot of crimes and mistakes in interpreting the Word of God. Jesus Christ never says, go and kill people, never says, submit or convert by force. He was actually always merciful to everyone that came to him. Now, the way we interpret the Old Testament...
Was he?
He was.
When he made a scourge and went into the temple and chased all the money changers out, was that peaceful?
No, any less than why we have police force today. I work as a security guard, the same as the lady over there. That's how I'm living. And I know that evil has to be stopped.
The what?
Evil has to be stopped. Those security guards over there, they are there in case, like a morally superior person, let me talk. They are here. If I create trouble or anyone creates trouble, I deserve to be taken out, like, show the way out.
Do you have a question?
I'm having difficulty.
Yes, my question is an invitation to you and to everyone else, because I think some misquotings of the Bible out of context. To actually study
Do you
the
have
Bible
an
by
example
themselves.
of us misquoting the Bible? Because as somebody who studied it and taught it and preached it from both sides.
The thing that you mentioned just about the slavery, for example, that is fresh in the mind of all of us.
About what?
The slavery.
Slavery.
Slavery, yeah. Slavery is allowed in the New Testament. It's not sanctioned in the New Testament. There is actually
Correct.
The whole letter of Philemon.
Is slavery moral or immoral? Is it wrong to...
immoral.
It's immoral?
It's immoral.
So why does the Old Testament say that it's okay and the New Testament never condemns it?
Yeah, I tell you what.
As a matter
Because
of fact,
Jesus Christ gave an explanation for all the things that God allowed in the past that were immoral. Like, for example, marrying cousins or nieces and all that.
That's
He said
not what
because
I
the
asked.
people,
We're talking
the
about
people did not
slavery.
say.
Okay.
The Bible says that slavery is moral, and Jesus comes along, and he has this opportunity. He knows that for thousands of years, people have thought slavery is moral, and it's not. Does he say, do not own people? No. He says, slaves, obey your masters, for this is right unto the Lord. Hang on. I don't care. Will you be my slave if I treat you really nice? Will you be my property? Is it moral or immoral? So God can only work within what society allows. He can say, don't eat shellfish, don't worship other gods, but he can't say, don't own people as property? What a useless, weak God if he can't tell us the most obvious thing that's wrong. Can you point to any verse anywhere in the Bible that says slavery is immoral?
No, that is not.
And yet you think it's immoral, and I think it's immoral.
Yes.
I can point to verses that specifically, supposedly come from God, saying you can enslave people. Why hasn't God corrected this?
He corrected this in the New Testament.
No, the New Testament doesn't change it. You just acknowledge that. We're done. No.
I want to speak to that very quickly. The New Testament actually reveals that Jesus said, I and the Father are one. God and Yahweh being the same, right? And Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, meaning that his nature does not change. So that the same deity, Yahweh, Jesus, who implemented and supported and commanded slavery and genocide and the rape of preteen girls and all these horrible things in the Old Testament, is exactly the same deity in the New Testament. And if you read the book of Matthew, Jesus actually came to affirm Old Testament law, not to deny it. So Christ himself actually said, yeah, it's awesome. And it's right there in black and white for anyone who cares to look.
And if he doesn't like it, he can smite me right now.
Our friend is welcome to join us afterwards and continue the debate if you wish.
Thank you. Thanks all three of you for coming down. I'm a big fan of your work, like most people here I assume would be. So what would all of you think to be the most poorly formulated theistic argument furthered by modern apologists for Christianity or Islam, basically monotheistic apologists in general? But could I add a caveat from an atheist experience-inspired moratorium on Pascal's wager?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was the question? What's the worst argument we've heard? Or the pet peeve we hear or whatever?
Yeah, what's the worst argument you've heard?
The pet peeve that I have is when they begin to challenge epistemology straight away. You can't prove this because you can't prove you even exist.
I can't hear you. I don't know
You
why.
can't.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you guys hear him out there?
It's probably difficult. Hold it up in front of you.
Even without a mic, they could hear him.
I think the problem is I don't have a stage monitor. I can't. The speakers are all. I'm not hearing what you guys are hearing. Do you want a handheld, pal?
Yeah, I don't know.
So for me, it's generally Pascal's wager, but I agree with Aaron, this challenging epistemology in the monotonous way that like Sai and others do. No thanks.
Yeah.
For me, it's either prove he doesn't exist, or because you are an atheist, you have declared God can't exist. Those two make me crazy. It's a complete misunderstanding of what atheism is.
Yeah, that's what I usually define as the lies of projection and equivocation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, all of you. Thank you for coming down. First of all, I want to thank you, Matt, especially, for providing the atheist experience that has changed a lot in my life. And a few years ago, I met a girl I fell in love with, and she was a fundamentalist Christian. And, well, you basically changed that.
So on that front, there's a couple things to say. Congrats. I just talk. It's up to everybody else to actually listen and think, and they have to be willing to do it. I want to disabuse some people of some notions. I don't think you necessarily hold this. I didn't create the show. I've been doing it for 10 years. The show's been on for 17.
Yeah, I know.
And while I tend to get a lot of the accolades and speak, I'm not even my favorite person on the show, even as egotistical as I am. There's a lot of people who do a lot of hard work, and I am thrilled to be surrounded by, Tracy, Jen, I'll forget somebody's name, but all of them. It's changed my life, and so I'm just thrilled to do it.
This leads to a question of mine, and it's because her family is still very religious, and obviously we want to have kids someday, but we're worried about them trying to indoctrinate our kids. So how would you guys protect your kids from indoctrination if you were suspecting that family members were going to do it?
Well, I speak out as much as I can on holding people accountable, whether it's the education system or whether it's politicians or what have you. We recently had a Texas evangelist that was talking against vaccinations. Like some of them are against science to that degree. And then as a result, we had a measles outbreak, which was traced to that church congregation. So ironically, that church ended up having to promote vaccinations. And when it gets into education, it just needs, from my perspective, it just needs to be objected to more vocally and more obviously. People need to be held accountable for the outrageous claims that they make.
I get this question in email a lot about kids and indoctrination and what they're worried about, what the grandparents do and all this. I think the key is to actually talk to people, talk to your family about it. I don't have kids myself, but my brother has 2 kids. He's a believer. And I told him, I said, when they come to me and they say, why doesn't Uncle Matt go to church? I'm going to tell them, and when I'm done telling them, I'm going to say, but you should probably talk to your folks about it, because it's not my job to undermine what they're teaching explicitly. I'd rather do it in a more subtle way by, instead of teaching them what to believe or what to think, I want to teach them how to think. How to go, and I want to instill in them a desire to explore the world. So I get to be the cool uncle who, let's get a telescope, or let's go to the museum, or let's ask questions, and I'm also the one who, when they ask me a question, I don't just say, oh, blah, 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 or I don't know. It's, I don't know, but let's see if we can go find out. And that, I think that solves a lot of the problems. I mean, I was indoctrinated, it took me 30 years to get out. I came out all right, I think. I don't know, maybe not. So I'm not terrified of the fact that kids get religious teachings. And I'm a huge proponent of teaching comparative religions in schools and not just as an elective. Because if you teach kids one religion, you indoctrinate them. And if you teach them all religions, you inoculate them.
Real fast, if I may. I encourage you, if you've ever worried about, hey, I don't want to do the reverse and indoctrinate my child into atheism, right? And say, there is no God, this is what you believe. Because then we're just as guilty as anybody else, right? Sure, we want our children or our loved ones to think like we do. We're all tribalistic in that way. I spoke with Dale McGowan with Parenting Beyond Belief, and he was raising his kids. And his kid was trying to figure out Santa Claus. He said, well, I don't know. Some people say that Santa Claus is this. How do the reindeer fly? Well, some people say they eat magic corn. That's what he told them. But you want to go out and do some research. So his kid goes off and whatnot. And he told his child, you can come back, tell me what you found, and you can change your mind 1,000 times. So he's given his child the freedom to explore the world honestly, and the excitement of learning is in play. And he comes back and he says, I think it's this. All right, awesome. All right, well, keep exploring that. And later on, he comes back and asks another question, and a series of years passes. And he said he's walking into the grocery store, and his kid looked up, and it was during Christmas, and he goes, Dad, you know that thing about Christmas and Santa Claus? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I think it's the moms and dads. And he had this big grin on his face. Now, what happened? He wasn't indoctrinated by his parent. He was encouraged and given the tools to go out and explore the world. And because he came to that conclusion on his own, he built the foundation himself. It's much more solid. I encourage a radio show we did a couple of years ago called Secular Parenting. Just go to thethinkingatheist.com and scroll the podcast. It's an hour and a half with Dale McGowan, and it is brilliant. Dale is absolutely fantastic, and I think it will really help you.
I tried 2 different approaches with my 2 children. My daughter, when she was 7, she asked me, which is the right religion? And I said, none of them. They're all wrong, including me. Which, because I actually had a religion at that time, was correct. And my daughter did not like that answer. And she said, I said, I don't care. That's what you get. You have to figure it out for yourself. But I had to do a different approach with my son. My son was being watched during the day by one of our relatives who I found out was showing him Jesus cartoons all day. And he got a moment when he could tell that there was nobody in earshot. He actually scanned to make sure that we were alone when he said, how does God just make stuff? And so I knew what the problem was here, and I leaned down and I said, he didn't. And you can see a wave of relief as the universe made sense again.
So we've got like 5 minutes where we want to get to questions and we want to meet everybody afterwards. We're kind of going to go into rapid fire mode rather than 3 alphas trying to talk for an hour after every question. So we'll do shorter answers for the next couple minutes.
My apologies.
No.
Short questions, short answers.
Okay, welcome, especially Seth, because I'm a big fan of his radio show. My question is, you guys have, it's kind of touching on what some people have said. You guys are from the United States. I've been there twice and I'm going there in a couple of weeks. What do you guys think are the differences in terms of how we perceive religion in Australia and how religion is perceived in the United States? Because my personal thing is that here no one really gives a stuff, whereas in America it's like a really big deal, and if you're atheist it's the worst thing ever.
The problem is when you have religion in a minority, it seems less offensive. And people don't realize what a threat it is until it seizes power. And so if you go into the northeast area of the United States, where there's not quite so much evangelism, they don't have so much of the law in their control, then people are very passive about, I'll just let people believe what they want to believe. But if you get down into the southern states, now it's virulent, and now it's indistinguishable from some of the horror stories we hear from the Middle Ages or from the Middle East or what have you, where religion rules over law and it's an automatic violation of human rights. That, I think, is the difference. You just don't have people in power exerting as much force system-wide as what we have in the South, at least in the southern states.
Okay, conflict and cooperation. Sorry. Do you think there's a value in atheists building bridges with religious people? I don't see religion going away anytime soon, even though a lot of people would like it to. I just maybe you know more about it than me, but I don't see it going away real soon. And you know, based on fear and preemptive strike, you know, and having no communication between groups and atheists kind of hating on religion in this section and the religious people over there, is there a value in building bridges between atheists and religious people, especially in light of ISIS and things like that, like progressive Muslims maybe, or?
I'll seek allies where I can get them, depending on what the situation is. I mean, when people want to come forward as rational human beings following a humanist cause, regardless whether it's, you know, inspired by secular beliefs or religious beliefs, and they're going against an atrocity, you know, like what you're talking about, we can put away the lesser stuff, and we can argue about that later on.
Yes. There are theists I'd rather share a stage with than some atheists. I'll happily work alongside people if we have a common goal. Reverend Barry Lynn, who runs Americans United for Separation of Church and State, I'll share a stage with him on church-state separation issues all day long and then argue with him all night about whether God exists. No problem.
Probably two more. We're going to have to call it.
All right.
I'm a Christian, which I hope you will forgive me for. Unfortunately, I did have a number of questions, but I'm trying to think which is the most important. From an evolutionary psychology point of view, I think religion has some function, some adaptive. It exists for a reason. So I think religion is with us for some time to come. And so my sort of project is to reform Christianity as opposed to be the revolutionary, to upturn Christianity. I think
I'm trying to reform Christianity too.
Well, I think we have a common cause there. Unfortunately, my project hasn't been very successful. There's a lot of Christians who are very, the young earth creationists, and it's hard to get them to have a hermeneutic of the Old Testament, which is that's obviously not the inspired word of God. How can you believe such?
You want to know what the problem is? Can I answer a different question than the one you were going to ask?
Go for it.
The problem is this. Everybody know who Westboro Baptist Church is? They're right. When they read what's in the Bible, that's what it says. Now, I wouldn't. My family agrees with their beliefs, does not agree with their tactics. Their actions aren't in keeping with the way my family would like to view this. But every time somebody wants to shrug off the Old Testament, as I was saying in my talk, that's original sin, that's the Ten Commandments, that's all the prophecies, that's all of this. And so as much as I love the fact that there are moderate liberal Christian theologians who have kind of been dragged kicking and screaming from the Dark Ages and are now fine with, LGBT rights and women and all kinds of things, they don't have a biblical foundation for that without cherry picking, without picking some specific verse and ignoring some others. That's a big problem. So I just chuck the whole thing. Keep the good wherever you find it, get rid of the bad. We've got a better world, which may be what you're doing.
I think the larger challenge is that why are you having to do the dirty work to equivocate, to modernize, to modify, to help us better understand? Why would anyone need to come out and clear things up for God? Heaven and hell in the balance. There are thousands upon thousands of denominations out there. Why in the world are we waiting? Did you guys see that guy Josh Feuerstein on social media with the red ball cap, right? Guy goes out there and he has that video and it goes freaking viral. And I actually posted a response video. And I capped it with, look, God speaks to you, right? Matt just spoke about this directly earlier in his speech. If he speaks directly to people one-on-one, why am I stuck listening to you? If God can speak to me, the Damascus Road experience, I'm right here. I'm all ears. I'm desperate for the truth. What kind of a sadist, what kind of a cheap trick is this to keep me in the dark? And if something's wrong or broken in your model, Why are you whispering in somebody else's ear down here when you are omnipotent and could fix it immediately and show us how and why you fixed it? You know, the idea that people would require an apologist to defend or equivocate in Christianity, to me is a contradiction. It actually refutes Christianity. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I've looked through your stuff online, and I haven't heard you guys speak on what Joseph Campbell was saying with the like Hero of a Thousand Faces and comparative religion, and his point of view that it's all kind of true, but none of it's literal. And like, is there an option for in the future, if we sort of move forward, that because religion's not going to go away, but we've got to sort of like put them in a point of view of history that, yep, maybe they're a cautionary tale. There's going to be all these churches and monuments to these religions in the future. What sort of context are we going to put that in your view?
I love Joseph Campbell, and if you go back and dig through the archive, Tracy Harris has actually done several episodes where she talks about his ideas with regard to religion. So, yeah.
Let's do one more.
How are we doing on the venue?
Can we get 4 questions out before anybody notices that there's 500 people over
We can if we shut up.
All right.
What do we think? All right, we'll do it quick.
Questions and quickly.
Look, I see that you are aging to go, so I'll forgo my question, but I have a theory why God condoned slavery. He never heard of outsourcing.
Quick comment. Well, atheist experience changed my life. I'm an ex-Muslim and now an atheist. My favorite person is Tracy Harris. So, me too. The question is, do you reckon atheism plus is a bit dangerous idea, or is it an okay idea? You know, and why can't we use different labels to sort of identify and solve problems and differently and unify?
We can use whatever different labels we need, but labels tend to unify us. So when it comes to something like Atheism Plus, when people kind of came up with the idea and listed all the things that it is, I was already all those things. They just put a new label on it. There were some issues with forums and somebody else. I don't even know that there is a movement with that label. I think it just kind of become mocked, but nothing about me has changed. I'm still a secular humanist, and I'm a feminist because of that, and I'm an atheist because I'm a skeptic, and I value equality, and I don't care what label you put on it, that's me.
Yeah, myself personally, I was all those things like he said, but I didn't like the Atheism Plus label any more than I like New Coke.
Have you heard of our musician and comedian, Tim Mitchin? Because he succinctly puts into 9 minutes his beat poem, Storm, which just, to me, is everything summed up into 9 minutes. Because
my favorite...
it's not so much Christianity that worries me at the moment, it's this New Age idea and Deepak Chopra, because they're going down the same line with not evidence-based. So I just hope you've seen him and love him.
Seen him? We do. Seen him live, met him briefly. Awesome.
Awesome.
And my favorite tune by his is Thank You, God.
Lucky last.
Well, first of all, thanks for being awesome human beings and role models for being awesome human beings and patient and stuff like that. I was wondering, you talked about levitating earlier and being a magician. No, that's not going to be right. Sorry, that was completely sorry, that backfired. No, I meant, did that have any influence on your thinking? And what's your sort of success rate, so to speak, I will say, in showing people how easily they are fooled? Does that make them more guarded and less likely to accept other ideas, or does it open them up to the idea that they might actually be wrong? Like, I mean, Aaron is probably, as a scientist, you're wrong all the time, and you must have sort of palm imprints on your forehead about the learning process and how painful it is. So I imagine you must have come across this a lot in magic and seen it in other people. So I'll give you
a really short answer. I did an entire talk in Auckland covering magic and skepticism and their interaction and how skepticism leads to atheism. I'm heading to Perth in the morning, and I will do some magic out there as well. It's important. The experts in how people fool themselves, because that's what really happens, are magicians. There's a reason why James Randi set up Project Alpha with Banachek and others to go in and fool the scientists. Anybody can be fooled, including James Randi and Banachek and me and everybody else. We're all fooled all the time. I find that in much the same way I talked about, let's get away from the actual thing we're talking about, talk about something else so that they get some revelation and then they can apply it. The same thing happens with using magic. Now, I don't like to generally expose this is how a trick is done, but I have on occasion. When I was in the Navy, I would do card tricks. And there were some people, much like the gentleman I ran across this morning, who were like, oh, is it painful to have that dark power flowing through you? And I was stunned, because at the time I'm a Christian, and the last thing I want is for somebody to think that I'm doing something through demonic powers. And so I would do the same card trick again and show them exactly how I did it. No, I did this move, I did this, and see, and this is what you thought you saw. And I swear, on several occasions, they would say, that's not what you did the first time. And then I have to say, if I can do it this way and fool you, and I can do it with dark powers and fool you, why would I do this at all? Why do you think I spent, at this point, 40 years learning how to do this one particular move to fool you if I actually have dark powers that I can use? There is something that wakes up in them, that the world is bigger than they thought, and the faulty assumptions, as we're asked about earlier, that they make are being exploited by magicians to entertain, and by con artists to make money, and by religions to... Religions are all about making the religion better and stronger. I don't see that it's actually about helping the people, except to the extent that helping the people helps the religion.
You guys get Netflix? Go on Netflix and look up a show called Brain Games, or look on the internet. You don't get Netflix?
And also...
All right, well, whatever service is provided here or online, look for a show called Brain Games. And what they do is essentially they use illusionists and whatnot to trick the brain. They show you time and time using games and experiments how you believe you're seeing one thing, and then they will sort of turn the tables on you and say, well, actually what your brain thought it saw was this. And one beautiful thing about this extremely entertaining show is it punctuates the difference between perception and reality. And I think if we can help educate people that what I see, hear, taste, smell, whatever, isn't necessarily what's happening, then they can begin to apply that knowledge about perception in other areas of their life. And they realize the brain, it's an amazing machine, but it ain't perfect. And perception isn't necessarily reality.
And I discovered when I was dabbling in the occult once upon a time that it was possible to make people see, hear, feel whatever they already wanted to believe in and what they already wanted. All you needed to do was to set the ambiance and get their imaginations psyched up. And it was easy to cause the illusion in themselves.
God, I'd have paid real money to see art in a seance, wouldn't you? How awesome is that?
I'd have run screaming from the room.
Before Adam Reeks of the Herd Mentality podcast comes up here very quickly, I would like to, and I'm sure the guys agree with me, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for making this opportunity happen. We're on a plane. They're going to Perth tomorrow. I'm on a plane home back to the United States first thing in the morning tomorrow. I will say the last 2 weeks have been amazing beyond words, and it's largely because of you, because of the response and the enthusiasm, the support, the stories, the love, the hugs, the people who have just been uplifting us. And the truth is that none of what we do works without you. And you have a tremendous opportunity in your own circles to be making a difference out there, and we want to be there for you in that way. So thank you. Thank you for the gift that you have given us in this tour. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for all you are doing and are going to do in the name of reason from today moving forward. Thank you very, very much.